An arrowhead-shaped logo depicts a mountain range and a bison. National Park Service. Text, Glacier National Park. Ann Mansolino Artist-in-Residence presentation. Glacier National Park, September 11th, 2020. In a log cabin, a brunette woman stands in front of an unlit stone fireplace with her hair pulled back. She wears dark-rimmed glasses, an athletic zip-up, and a face mask. She looks into the camera and waves.
Hi, I'm Ann Mansolino. I am the Artist-in-Residence in Glacier National Park from August 31st to September 25th, 2020, which explains why I'm wearing the face mask as we are doing this residency and this talk during the COVID-19 pandemic, when masks are what you do to stay safe. So if you're seeing this in a future year and wondering what's going on, pandemic. So I am here from Calgary, Alberta in Canada.
Anne holds up a black box with a topographic map of a glacier on its lid. Small text labels it Glacier Preservation Kit.
And I am an artist who works with photography, writing, and bookbinding. And in my artwork, I explore the relationship between the internal self and external ideas of place through handmade books, and I'll show you some of those. And in my work, I'm interested in exploring the ways in which the landscape and the natural environment can help us understand ourselves. Use the landscape as metaphor for emotion, psychology, and internal experience, and also look at landscape just as an expression of our literal relationship to the land we inhabit and its environment. To make that make more sense, I'm going to show you some examples of things I've done in the past, and then I'll also talk about what I'm working on here in Glacier during the residency.
She opens the lid, which folds along one side like the binding of a book. Inside, 4 vials of different sizes sit nestled into small grooves. The largest vial is full of water, while the others contain rocks and sand.
I have made some work in the past that deals directly with glaciers. This one is the Glacier Preservation Kit, which I made in response to being on a glacier in Alaska. It is a box which opens up, and the idea is it's a glacier preservation kit, since glaciers are melting, that has the components of a glacier, like water, rocks, with the idea that someone would want to try to save them and put the glacier back together to save it, but also sort of joking at the futility of trying to do so. There are water and rocks and sand in here as the kind of things you could find in a glacier, but remember, don't actually take things from the park. You cannot take anything out of the park. These are the kinds of things that a glacier would be made of.
Below the vials, a rectangular book the size of her palm sits in a niche. She takes it out and sets the rest of the box aside.
In addition to having the components of the glacier in the specimen bottles, there's also a book about the Root Glacier in Alaska, and it says, "I cannot save the glacier, but I save part of one."
Opening the book, she unfolds the pages inside, which stretch out like an accordion. Its pages alternate between pictures of the glacier and small boxes of text.
And then it talks about, it has pictures that I shot on the glacier there, and writing about the loss of the Root Glacier as it is receding over time.
Anne folds the pages back up and shuts the cover. She presses the book back into the box, reassembling the preservation kit.
So with projects like this, because I work with photography, writing, and bookbinding, I take the pictures, I do the bookbinding, I make the box, I do everything by hand. So I am working with cardboard, glue, and paper as a way of making objects like this.
Setting the kit aside, she picks up a black book box with a glacier-shaped book inside. The top of the book slopes away from its spine with an outer layer folded diagonally in the opposite direction, giving the book the appearance of zigzagging down.
Another project dealing directly with glaciers is this one called Glacial Flow.
The side of the book box bears its title. She slips the all-white book out of the small box, showing off the 2 components.
It's a book that fits into a box covered in topographic maps of the area of the glacier. I wanted to make a book that was both the shape of a glacier and talking about glaciers, so that the form and the content go together.
Grabbing the base of its downward-sloping cover, Anne unfolds it. It gently stretches out to look like a rising mountain, coming to a point at the bottom.
I wanted it to open up so it looks like a mountain receding into the distance as it opens. Has a binding around the back.
3 taut strips of ribbon hold the binding together. She turns the book to face the camera, propping open the text-filled pages. She unfolds the back cover to form a gently sloping triangle that rises to a rounded peak at the book's spine. The pages are cut along the top to follow the same descent as the covers.
And then it opens up fully into these extended mountain forms on both sides. The text is about the glacier and the flow of the glacier over time, because glaciers are rivers of ice that move. They look like they are static, but they are actually always in motion, even though you can't really see that motion. I use that idea as a metaphor for talking about the changes and transformations that we go through in our own lives and how they may not be visible on the surface. So it's based in research about glaciers and learning the forms and how they work geologically, and then using that as a means and as a language to talk about internal change and understand the self.
She carefully sets that book aside and holds up a thin, gray paperback with rounded corners. There's a lighter rectangle on the cover with an image of an iceberg nestled between its title. The Field Guide to Internal Icebergs.
Another past project is the Field Guide to Internal Icebergs, and it is based on a trip to Newfoundland in 2017. In a year in which there was a lot of sea ice and a lot of icebergs right off the coast.
She flips open the field guide. Images of sculpted turquoise icebergs rest on the top of each page, with text dripping beneath them to form triangles pointing down, as if the words were the submerged part of the ice.
So I wanted to make something that looked like a traditional pocket field guide in which you would learn to identify a particular thing in the landscape. So it shows the different shapes of icebergs, but it uses these as metaphor to talk about the aspects of our life that are usually unseen and beneath the surface. So things like social anxiety or insecurity or other aspects of our life that people don't see. So again, the idea of landscape as landscape and learning about icebergs and where they come from and how they melt, which is talked about in this, but also as a way of connecting things to self.
Putting the field guide off to the side, she picks up a larger but thinner black box. On the front, text on a white background reads, "Postcards from Mars."
And because I'm not always in landscapes that are frozen, here's one that is based on desert. It's called Postcards from Mars, and it was made on a trip to Utah to an area that is outside the Mars Desert Research Station, and because it is more like Mars than almost anywhere else on Earth.
She flips up the lid and takes out a stack of desert photos. The first image has a dusty mound of rocks at the focal point.
It uses photographs collected in a box that I made that are postcards on the back and photographs of the area on the front to talk about the experiences there. It started by saying, "I have been to Mars. It is just outside of Hanksville, Utah."
Another image shows an empty dirt road stretching off toward distant hills.
And it uses photographs of that landscape and how barren and remote it is to talk about difficulties I was having at the time in a metaphoric way, about feeling like you're trapped on an inhospitable planet.
She holds up one featuring large boulders neatly scattered across the smooth, windswept desert floor. Mountains stretch out along the horizon behind them. She sets down the postcards and shows a square book to the camera. It reads, "Topography as Braille as Topography." Braille lettering follows beneath it.
Another project that has relevance to what I'm doing in Glacier that I'd done before coming here is this one called Topography as Braille as Topography. And actually wrote it in Braille and punched it by hand. And it is looking at forms in the landscape.
She stretches out the accordion-style pages, which each have a line drawing of a glacial landform, English text, and Braille.
That stick up, that tell you something about the land. And I'm going to read to you the first part of it. What if we could read the landscape like a book, if words in the land were parallel ways of knowing? What if we could read the story of the earth by feel, read its bumps and ridges like monumental braille upon the surface of the world? These raised area of land tell us the stories of glaciers advancing and retreating, of freezing and thawing, of accumulation and erosion, of the long and slow passage of geologic time. So it goes through some different landforms, defining them, writing them in English and in Braille with images of them, and then concluding, Geologic stories are written on the land like braille on a page. They provide physical evidence of what we cannot see. By reading these bumps on the Earth's surface, we, like the blind, can know through feel, through physical presence, the stories that are hidden from view but shape the world we inhabit each day. And while I've made this one previously, it seems incredibly relevant to our time here in Glacier, as this place is known for glaciers, and yet the glaciers are melting and disappearing. But even when they're gone, the forms that are left by glacial action on the land will still be present and are things that will allow us to read the action of glacial forms historically in this space.
Anne puts that book aside and picks up an all-black horizontal book with a small title on a white rectangle. Safe Inside.
And then one last past thing I'm going to share with you is this one called Safe Inside. And it is based on the COVID-19 pandemic that is going on right now. I made this in March as everything was just starting and becoming frightening.
She flips to a set of pages with a single column of text on the right-hand side of the second page.
And it is a photographic and written piece about isolation. About, it starts with, what do we do when we can't go outside, when it's too risky, too dangerous, too uncertain, when all around us is in fear. We stay home and look at the world through the windows. We stay home and shelter from a threat we can't see but know is out there growing, spreading more each day. We hope that it's safe within our own walls. We stay inside and look at the empty streets, remembering what normal looked like just a short time ago, which suddenly feels like a long time ago.
The next page features an icy photo of a home tucked between two images of snowy fences.
And I photographed through the windows so that the frost and the ice partially obscures what I see out through them.
A light frost runs across the edge of a photo. Beyond the hazy blues of ice is the rich brown of a warm home. The next page's photo is blurred by thick fog on the glass. A smaller home is visible through streaks of condensation.
So that you get the sense of being inside to stay safe, but you also get the window as a barrier between you and the outside world as the subject of the image. And the frost and the ice and the snow and the water that's on it becomes part of the surface of the image, becomes part of that barrier. Usually you look through the window at what's outside of it, but I really wanted the window as a surface that separates you from the outside world to become a subject.
Several photos show smudges on window panes in crisp focus, with blurred images of the world outside behind them. Anne sets the book down and glances back at the camera.
So that's the kind of thing I've done in the past before coming here. While I'm the artist in residence, I am working on projects that are going to be similar in style, similar in approach to these. And it's hard to talk in a mask. If it's later than 2020 and this is over, you'll remember this. Or you won't. Take a breath. I'll keep going. Okay. While in residence here, I'm working on some projects that are related to this. One in particular is looking at glacial recession within the park. I have gotten some maps of the glacial perimeters over the years from 1850 to the present. And you can see that the line in the perimeter of the glacier shrinks and shrinks as time goes on. What I am doing with this is I'm making flip books of the glaciers that show the recession. So as you turn through the pages, you'll see like a flip book animation of the glacier shrinking. So the goal is to make something in book form that's really accessible to see just how much we're losing the glaciers and how quickly. But again, because my work also deals with landscape as metaphor, the other thing I want to do with that is to look at the difference between still images and time. And about how we perceive things differently if we see a single image isolated versus whether we see them in the flow of time. So if you see a single image of the edge of a glacier, you really don't know, was it bigger before? Is it changing? It's when you see it in the flow of time that you realize just how much we're losing. Similarly, with your own life, if you see one image out of context, you don't get a sense of the flow of it, or the meaning of it, or how it fits into the larger trajectory of your life and experience. So I want the glaciers to be glaciers and to be about that environmental loss, but I also want them to be a larger sense of understanding, of just like the sense of geologic time, and also just the span of your own life and how you understand things differently when seen in context over time versus whether seen in one image extracted from time. And then another project I'm working on here is dealing with the idea of the US-Canadian border. As you know, Glacier Park goes right up to the border with Canada, and it continues as Waterton Park in Canada. I'm looking at the idea of that land being continuous and discontinuous. So it's continuous as a sense of ecology, geography, geology, animal and plant habitat. There's no line between that. Whereas there is a political line between these spaces. And I'm interested in this because I'm an American who lives in Canada, and I'm looking at the land as land, but I'm also looking at it as a sense of identity and as life. That I'm somebody whose life is simultaneously continuous as me, but is also divided between being on this side of the border and that side, and how we can use the land as a way of talking about that sense of continuity and discontinuity. My process in terms of what I'm actually doing on a day-to-day basis while I'm here, because my work deals with the internal experience and the external experience, I'm trying to find a balance between those two things during the time that I'm spending here. So I am going out and hiking and exploring with the camera, trying to see what I can, document what is meaningful, document what I see.
She picks up a camera with a telephoto lens attached to the front. She holds it up as if preparing to take a picture before setting it aside.
And then I come back, and I'm spending time in the cabin where we are right now. This is the Artist-in-Residence cabin, where I spend a lot of time reflecting. I've got a sketchbook. I make these.
She holds up a square sketchbook with the same ribbon binding as the Glacier book. A small window cut into the front cover allows a picture to peek through.
And I spend a lot of time drawing, writing, reflecting on what my experiences are, what I'm doing here, which is where the writing for these projects tends to come from. I go outside, I have experiences, I come back, I process those and turn them into the kind of texts that end up in the work.
She puts down the sketchbook and raises a stack of books and articles with notes sticking from their pages.
And then I'm also doing a lot of reading. I have borrowed materials from the library here in Glacier National Park about the history of the park and other issues related to the projects that I'm doing. So I'm spending a lot of time going through those as well, so that as I make the pieces I'm trying to make from this experience, it's informed by the experience that I'm having out in the landscape, as well as by library research and knowledge about place, landscape, geology, history, and that those two things fit together so that when I'm working metaphorically between the internal and the external, I can come from a place of experience and information to put them together. So the projects I mentioned are the ones that I know I'm working on while I'm here, and those will probably be finished and actually turned into like a finished book form when I get home and I have all of my tools and materials. But beyond that, I know that like with experiences like this, I'm immersed in the place for my time there, and that long after I'm home, in the weeks and the months that follow, new ideas come up from the experiences that I had that lead to projects that I couldn't have planned while I'm here. So I know that the value of the residency is the experience that I'm having, but it's also something that just immersion in this landscape over time and in the information and in the experience will continue to feed who I am and what I make creatively, artistically, for the time that follows in ways that I can't anticipate fully yet. So I hope that after I return home, that I will make things that come out of this experience that reflect aspects of what it means to be human in the world, but also how to live with a sense of preservation and conservation and a sense of who we are in this land over time. So for this experience now and for the time that I know will come after it, I'm very grateful. Thank you.